The cultural depravity and degeneracy of the so-called Pride movement has so obviously crossed the line now that no healthy society would tolerate what we're seeing today. Over the weekend, at the unfortunately titled Quebec City Museum of Civilization, children were invited to watch a man expose himself in front of them while giving the children a lecture on white privilege and black transgender women. Kids in the audience, whose depraved parents took them to watch this act of indecent exposure, are seen looking away, trying to shield themselves, while the organizers and sponsors of this event proudly boast of their achievement in shredding the innocence of these kids. What you and I see as a disgusting act that in most cases would be a violation of the law, the organizers and sponsors of the event, which include TD Bank and Ubisoft, see as art. That's right, what you're actually seeing is artistic, and our Puritan senses aren't allowing us to truly appreciate the art. The line was crossed when governments normalized and protected drag shows for kids from being protested in our country. The line was also crossed when hospitals and clinics opened their gender-affirming butcher shops and normalizing child transgenderism, which obviously doesn't exist. And now, the obvious conclusion to our failure to oppose this depravity is coming true. The banks, working in conjunction with governments, are now proudly sponsoring events where men expose themselves in front of children, all in the name of pride. Enough is enough. Drop a like on the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: why is this happening in society today? I'm curious to read why you guys think this is taking place, the origins of this, and the true purpose of all of this depravity and complete nonsense. All right, let's get into it. Well, it's Pride Month, so you know what that means. The absolute worst of society must be tolerated and accepted, because any criticism of some of these acts might be seen as homophobic, and we wouldn't want that, would we? That would be terrible. So of course, in keeping with all of this complete insanity, the Quebec City Museum of Civilization has put on their Pride Month exhibit called Love Me Gender, when really the name of the exhibition could be called The Fall of Quebec Civilization. Proudly sponsored by TD Bank, of course, there are some very, shall we say, interesting things to see at this exhibit. This LGBTQIA2S+ exhibit put on by the Museum of Civilization. But none more disgusting, none more depraved, and none more demonic, shall we say, than this opening night performance by someone dressed in saran wrap in a plexiglass window, exposing himself to children in the audience while giving a lecture about white supremacy.
Peau blanche, peau blanche, immaculée, peau blanche, privilégiée. Avez-vous peur d'y songer qu'une femme noire, trans, a précédé ma route? Je peux m'émanciper ce soir au musée.
Now, the museum is calling what you just saw a contemporary art performance. How artistic. The name of that theatrical company that put on this contemporary art performance is called Kill Tapur. Also invited to perform on this opening night was, of course, a child drag performer, because that's just basically par for the course today. If you don't have a child drag performer, is it really a pride event? In response to a request for comment from the Journal of Montreal, the PR director of the Museum of Civilization said that the event was aimed at an informed audience. As this woman says, all these performances and interventions took place exclusively as part of the launch evening and were aimed at an informed audience. They aimed to represent the artistic diversity of this community. Now, on display at the Museum of Civilization for anyone to go and view, like I said, are some very interesting things. The entire arsenal of pride flags are available to view, of course, but alongside the pride flags, there are also different models of genitalia for everyone to see, because how artistic, right? Also on display, different vials of hormones. Great viewing experience. Photos of political tattoos, naked transgender bodies, and also, for good measure, as is sort of the case with all of these pride events, desecrated Christian symbols. Now, the usual sloganeering at all of these different pride events goes hand in hand with what is on display. You've got the usual they, them, theirs. Also on display, the slogan, "It's a beautiful day to smash the patriarchy." Where's the patriarchy when you need it, right? But one slogan is worth mentioning on the show because it's very bizarre, very strange, and kind of points to the thought process behind a lot of the people pushing all of this nonsense. The slogan goes as follows: "Men need abortions too." The reason why we don't understand that slogan, "Men need abortions too," must be because we're not smart enough to understand it. We need to become more educated on this stuff for us to fully appreciate the power behind the statement, "Men need abortions too." That must be what it is. It should be noted as well that if it weren't for Rebel News journalist Alexa Lavoie getting inside the Museum of Civilization and documenting and filming this event, we wouldn't know about this. This sort of thing would kind of go under the radar. But luckily, we have journalists who are here to expose what's taking place and show the world just how depraved and how completely lost the people pushing this stuff really are. After watching the video of a man being paid by taxpayer money and being sponsored by TD Bank to expose himself in front of kids, I started to think that, this seems like a violation of the law, doesn't it? This seems like the kind of thing that if it weren't being branded as art, it would be a flagrant violation of the law. So I did some digging and wanted to pull up what the Quebec law states about indecent exposure. Now, according to Quebec law, carrying out an indecent act in a public place in front of other people is forbidden. An example of an indecent act is a man showing his genitals in public. It's also forbidden to carry out an indecent act in a private place with the intention to offend others. Also, Quebec law states very clearly that being nude in a public place without a valid reason is forbidden. It's also forbidden to be nude in private property where other people can see you. If this act were taking place in any other context, and if it weren't being marketed under artistic performances, also, if it weren't being sponsored and put on by the Quebec Museum of Civilization and sponsored by TD Bank, well, it would be a criminal offense. Now, all of this just follows the continued event after event, example after example of things that a normal and healthy society simply would not tolerate. Drag summer camps being funded by the federal government, drag shows for kids being funded by provincial governments, and events like this proudly being sponsored by our biggest banks and financial institutions. So again, the question has to be asked, why are we tolerating this? Why are we allowing these events to take place? And where are the conservative politicians demanding an end to this? To put the fear aside of maybe offending some small portion of our population and doing the right thing and saying enough is enough. Perhaps, however, that explains why we're now seeing parents pulling their kids out of school during the month of June to avoid them facing the inevitable indoctrination of being forced the pride nonsense on these students. Take a look at this story. It really is illuminating to what is taking place. There is clearly a pushback taking place. It's not coming from politicians. It's not coming from conservatives in elected office. It's coming from parents who have simply had enough. Take a look at this. Some Ottawa parents keep kids home from school due to pride activities, Ottawa Catholic District School Board says. On Thursday, Ottawa's Public School Board reported 9 of its schools had absent rates over 40%, with 2 schools exceeding 60%. As my colleague Rupert Subramania points out on Twitter, the headline doesn't really match the contents of the article, does it? The headline says some parents are keeping their kids home from school, while actually the school boards are reporting absentee rates of over 40%, with 2 schools at 60%. The reality is, parents are doing the right thing here. If schools are going to abandon their duty of teaching kids in exchange for promoting propaganda, for promoting political ideology instead of education, instead of math and history, and actual important things to learn, well, what's the point, really, A mother or a father could do a better job at home teaching their kids what they need to learn, rather than some blue-haired teacher telling them that actually men are women and women are men. It's okay to admit that we have crossed the line as a society, because if we can't say that openly, then we have no hope at all. The line is crossed when men expose themselves in front of children in the name of pride. The line is crossed when we have clinics and hospitals butchering children in the name of youth transgenderism. That doesn't mean that you can't be proud to be gay. That doesn't mean you can't be proud to be lesbian. It means that we have the right to say, this has gone too far. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.